What'd
you say? Do you think Julia will come back as a representative for America, or will we have the new character be either American or African or Indian? I personally think Julia will be in season 3. Basically, we don't have a American female character in the game, but I know players don't care about where characters are from. They only care about the fighting styles and the identity. But the Tekken developers do. For that reason, Julia is very, very likely. That's called diversity? Well, not really. I don't think the word diversity works for fighting games. The one thing that blew my mind about Street Fighter, because I discovered Street Fighter before Tekken. So what I discovered about Street Fighter, and I thought was really cool, is about how like they had many different characters. They would show you the map and they would show you the different stages of where they are. We're going to China, and then you have the Chinese waifu Chun-Li. We're going to Russia. Now you got Zangief. You know, fighting games was one of the first things ever, not just video games, but like out of movies, out of TV shows. Fighting games was the first thing ever to show every region of the world as cool as possible. The Russian isn't the stereotypical bad guy. The Chinese isn't the stereotypical bad guy. And if you think about it, they could have done that. Japanese and China, they have a very intense rivalry, and it spans back super far. This is why Harada didn't want to put Wing Chun into Tekken, because Wing Chun was personally used against the Japanese people. I think a lot of things will be cool. I think, someone's in the chat is saying Native American. I see a lot of people saying Indian. I think a lot of that stuff will be cool. You talk about putting, and see, I think Julia is going to come to Tekken 8. I think it's pretty much confirmed. I just thought about this. Harada has basically dropped hints at who the characters will be. And in the early days of Tekken 8, it wasn't so obvious. But as time went on and the characters got revealed, we started to see a pattern. Harada does a super long tweet like this, explaining the character, and then reveal the character. Now, this one is about Josie. Josie's not in the game. But here's the thing. Josie is also in relationship to Fahkumram. She connects. So this thing that Harada was talking about basically talks about why Josie didn't work as a character. The main thing that was highlighted here is basically how she cries. Crybaby persona, Tekken players didn't like that. But then what he did a little bit later is he talked about the character Fahkumram. And at the time, we didn't think nothing of this, once again. But if you think about what he's saying here, he is now talking about the problems with Fahkumram at launch. An element of Fahkumram that I think made him even more stronger was his wonky hitbox. That is something that was not intentional, and it was not designed, and it was something that took a long time for them to fix, because they had to figure out what was happening with his hitbox. And Harada is basically explaining that aspect of Fahkumram in great detail. And he's basically, I see this now as him saying this will not happen with Tekken 8. His hitbox is something that we're going to make sure works and is exactly like it's supposed to be. And this is him talking about Fahkumram. And then a little bit later, Fahkumram got revealed. The next time we had this happen was Anna. Something that I also want to note is that Harada has never done a super long breakdown like this for a character that's not in a game, except for Julia, which we're going to talk about. But this Anna one, he talked about her origins with Nina, Anna, their similarities. He basically just went super into detail. 6 months later from this, Anna shows up in the game. What this reminded me of, what I just thought back to, is how even further back he did one for Julia. Harada here has a serious question, but it's not intended to be answered from everyone. In the past, Tekken got some pushback for Julia being basically a Native American stereotype. Now, in my opinion, I love that. You talk about the tomahawk wielding Apache, that's historic. I would put those warriors up there with like the Romans, the Spartans, the knights. They're historic. They should be remembered. They should be honored. I don't see it as like a stereotype or like cultural appropriation. I see it as like a celebration. But not everyone shares that idea. And in the past, he got pushback for it. And he was thinking about how he should change it going forward. So this is where I'll read. So he says, I would like to hear from Native Americans in Tekken community regarding the design of Julia and Michelle. I have worked on many character ideas for my games. It's especially important to note that Tekken and Soul Calibur were born in the 90s, were originally arcade games. Arcade games require you to insert a coin and move on to the gameplay a few seconds. Fighting games in particular need to convey characters' personality and charm within a limited amount of time. You guys remember the arcades where like counted down for you to pick a character, and then once that time counted down, it would just lock in whatever character you were hovering on? So Harada is saying that he needed to express the unique identities and characters in that short amount of time, and this is why they made Julia a Native American stereotype, so that was so people could understand that that's what she is. She's Native American. The same is true for Julia and Michelle. We wanted to reflect the Native American heritage in the character's design, so we took inspiration from Native American traditions of war bonnets and added feathers accents to their heads, especially in the 90s when the numbers of polygons was too small to express. However, over time around Tekken 6 Tag 2, we received a point of view from a fan who called herself Native American. To summarize the point, the person says, this is a quote, "I think the feathers Julia's wear on her heads are a good design because it promotes stereotypes. Modern Native Americans are more normal and fashionable." In addition, her added that these are more fashion modern Native American students that I've photographed in my college campus, and showed me many pictures. And that person said, "You see, no one is wearing stereotypical Native American fashion." So basically, Harada was approached by some college campus student and was shown a bunch of picture of normal people, and they were saying this is how Julia should be dressed. And Harada is basically posing the picture to the Native American Tekken players, specifically the Native American Tekken players. Where is that question at? Suppose I were to design a new Native American character, one that is more adverse than necessary to being evaluated as a stereotype, or one that avoids such stereotype. In that case, for example, I might design a common, safe, controversy-free of monochromic t-shirts and jeans, but then perhaps looking at the game screen on the character select, this Native American character would not be understandable. So I don't know where we could read all of this, right? You see how much reading it is. We're not going to read all of that, but the question is, here's the question again. I would like to ask Native American community, do you have any concerns about Julia or Michelle as pointed out in terms of the design above? Question 2. Also, Julia and Michelle are already known characters, so I think fans will understand the identity of the characters even if we dare to make them an impersonable fashion. But if I were to design a new Native American, is there a item that is not controversial in its expression that would convey a glance that it is Native American? Something else we need to say as well, because this happened on January 4th, 2024. But we also know with characters like Clive, Heihachi, and Fakerbomb, and this basically applies to all of the DLC, but we know with those 3 characters specifically, Clive was being worked on 2 years in advance. Fakerbomb was being worked on 2 years in advance. This is how we seen the leak of him. And then Heihachi, the developer straight up and told us that he was being worked on 2023. He released in 24, late 24. So my point is that this tweet happening in 2024 and potentially the final character being a new Native American character would be 2 years. And seeing how Harada is asking the player base for design input, it sounds to me like they're either making a new Native American character, and that will be the final character for season 2, or he is just talking about how can we recreate Julia. One of the 2 things is going to happen. The final character will be Native American, or Julia is basically going to show up with a very interesting design. Turquoise is highly valued in Native American culture, particularly in southwestern United States, as it's often associated with the sky and water. It symbolizes protection, healing, good fortune, spiritual connection. But I mean, you do got to keep in consideration that Harada said the color no longer matters. Do you guys feel like we're on to something, or you guys think like, nah? Oh, wait. So this is the most liked response. Generally good approach is to use symbols that represents specific language cultures rather than Native American as a whole. The problem with trying to find symbol or visually tell Native American as a whole is that you're taking hundreds of different cultures across a huge area. Wait, what is this? What is this? Why is this on the screen? What is this? How long has this been on the top of the screen for? What is this? A minute? Like a while ago? What? No one said remove that. Sometimes I'll leave the screen like this for 30 minutes and the chat won't say nothing. I'll be like, look at this. How is this possible? And no one in the chat says nothing. What? We left off with the conversation of Julia. and how if you stick a feather in someone's head, you can't just say that's Native American, because Native American is like specific cultures and regions. And so that's kind of what this person is saying at the start of it. It says indigenous cultures from, say, California versus the ones located from Great Lakes or New York's are about as distant from one another as Britain and Egypt or India is from Eastern China. Yes, some shared culture features and symbols in a way that all European countries or Asians once share elements, but obviously you risk over generalizing. If I can, I want to go on a tangent about indigenous cultures, since it's what I deal with. Tekken with Ogre and a lot of other games treat them as dead ancient cultures, but it's worth remembering that Mexico, Guatemala, etc., millions of people speak the language. I think it would be neat if we could see a fighting game characters from those cultures that aren't just ancient super beings revived from thousands of years ago. You know that college student who ran up on Harada? This is what they should have said. So we all agree with what this person is saying, right? This person is spitting all the facts. And I do love this side-by-side comparison here. The stereotypical perspective of what those regions look like. Dark sky, gray buildings, and then a bunch of savages down there with tomahawks. And I think this is something that history does a lot. We look at history as just being like dark and dingy and dirty. It really underestimates or undermines their culture and what they were able to achieve with limited resources. Look, they didn't have tractors and cranes, but they did have help from aliens. Julia can and should come back, but make her gimmick better. What gimmick? What do you think they should highlight? Because I guess that is something we should talk about. She went from being, where's my mom, to the nature lover, to now the streamer nature lover. I think if they drop the streamer persona, that's more of what we don't like. Didn't we get upset that Heihachi retconned Tekken 7? So why would we want Julia to retcon Tekken 7? We have to be clear in our messaging to the developers. And I think that Julia, she can go back to her roots, but also maintain the streamer elements of it. When you think about the character Julia, what is a word that you would use to describe her? Like Brian Fury is like a maniac. He's like a psycho. A baddie, bro, is no help. OnlyFans, boring. Bro, what? No. I didn't say how you guys would describe her. I said, how would you guys describe her? You guys are not listening. What is her defining personality? Eco-friendly? Bro's describing her like she's a Tesla. Bro's about to start talking about some fuel economy, some efficient. What?